Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. This is Tim here. I wanted to wish you a happy Valentine's Day today being the 14th and the 14th episode, so that's super exciting. Today's video will be a Valentine's Day inspired painting tutorial of this cute rose garden landscape at sunset. Now, I come from a more traditional painting background, and I have completely switched over to digital painting the last couple of years. And my goal with these tutorials are to really help you create a digital painting that feels more like a traditional painting. And no matter what your skill level, you can create something that you had fun with and are super proud of. So in today's video, we will be using the damp brush and the soft airbrush mostly, and I will share my settings here just momentarily. Every new element in this painting is added on a new layer to help make blending easier. I've also included 6 breaks within this painting, that way it's easier to pause, and it was actually a lot easier to create this way. So here is the palette that I've used in this painting, so that way you can take a couple of screenshots and reference all of the colors in the actual tutorial. That way you can move them to your own palette. And I am also using an eye pencil for this tutorial. And upcoming here are my brush settings, and this is for the damp brush. Currently, the damp brush is only available on the Pocket Procreate version, but I am working on a video and it's going to come out very soon on how to make this brush from scratch. But if you don't want to use this brush and want to use something else, please feel free to use your own favorite brushes. I would love to see what you create with it. If you don't want to use those settings, that is perfectly fine. The only thing I would highly recommend is turning the grain scale down to about 15%. That way you don't get as many holes in the blending. But if you are ready, let's begin. So first, in a new layer, we will be laying down the color orange from the palette over the whole painting. And then in a new layer, using the pink red at the very bottom, working our way up using the magenta pink, magenta, purple, and blue with the damp brush with the blue on the very top, and with a medium-sized brush and a medium opacity, very lightly blend these colors out. Next, in a new layer, using the light yellow orange and the light yellow, lay down color with the light yellow at the very bottom of the colors we just applied, and lightly blend up and out until you're happy. Next, in a new layer, using the soft airbrush and the lighter of the dark blue greens, which is the last green in the second row of the tiny palette, lay down a solid layer of color from the upper middle part of the painting to the bottom and lightly blend where it meets the sky. And it should be a little bit hazy where the ground meets the sky at. Next, in a new layer with the dark green, which is the second green in the third row down, begin sketching out the rough shape for the trees. You'll sketch this color over top of the grass, and these will become the background trees. You're going to leave a slight gap in the middle of it, and as the trees recede, you're going to want to make your trees just a little bit smaller. And both sides of the painting with those trees should kind of resemble a V shape, which will pull the viewer's eye to the middle of the painting where the sunset is actually happening. Next, using the blend brush and the damp brush, slightly drag that green color with the trees down, and then using a smaller size brush and circular scrubbing motions, begin lightly buffing out the shape of the trees, really allowing some of the transparency of the background to show through a little bit, and lightly blend where the trees and the grass meet. After you're happy with your trees, you're then going to use the blend brush and, using a very light hand with the same scrubbing motion, lightly create the impression of bushes in front of the trees. And this is where taking advantage of some of the transparencies will really help us. That way we kind of get the impression of a different colored bush in front, but it's really just allowing some of the background color to show through. This is definitely a painting technique that I use a lot, and I actually used it a lot in my traditional paintings as well. So I was super excited to figure out a way to incorporate it into my digital painting. So this actually brings us to the end of part 1. So if you need to take a break or if you need to catch up, definitely feel free to pause the video here, and I'll be here waiting when you're ready. So this brings us to part 2. So next, with the blue in the palette, and it's the same blue we used for the upper part of the sky, in the upper right hand side of the painting, with a very light hand, begin sketching out the shape of the water. And definitely feel free to add as little or as much water as you like. This is going to be a cute little pond, and then lightly using the blend brush, you're going to blend the edges out. So when you're happy with your blending, in a new layer with the blue-green color, which is the first green in the third row, with a small brush and 30 to 40% opacity, begin sketching in the grass, lightly building up the color, and then using a medium-sized brush with a medium opacity to blend it out. Really just building up that color from the back to the front. And you can slightly adjust and change your sizes of brushes if that feels more comfortable to you. Sometimes I like to change the size of it. Sometimes when you use a tiny brush, it's hard to actually paint with. So if you need to make the brush a little bit bigger, definitely feel free to. Sometimes it can be hard to lay down a lot of color at once if the brush is too small. Next, in a new layer with the damp brush, we're going to start sketching out the bushes with the middle of the dark blue greens, which is the second from the last green in the second row in the small palette. And we're going to start laying down the bushes on both sides of the painting and then lightly blend out the edges. And then on that same layer with a slightly smaller size brush, begin blending kind of lightly by pushing out the edges of the bush just to create smaller, more detailed shapes within the shape, and then lightly blend out the bottoms of the bushes using a back and forth scrubbing motion. Once you're happy with your blending, in a new layer with the lighter of the dark blue greens, which is the last green in the second row in the tiny palette, lay some more color over top of those bushes just to give them a little bit more depth of color, but not completely getting rid of the darker color we just first laid down. And then just lightly blending that out with a medium-sized brush. Next, in a new layer with the lighter of the blue greens, which is the first green in the third row, we're going to sketch in some more detailed grass shapes with a slightly smaller brush and medium opacity. Just lightly going over all of the grass we created from earlier, really building up that color and adding some highlights to these new areas. Once you're happy with all of the highlights that you've added, you're going to lightly blend this out with a medium-sized brush and medium opacity, which will then bring us to the end of part 2. If you need to pause or to rewind, definitely feel free to. Or if you need something to drink or to stretch your legs, we will begin part 3 when you're ready. In a new layer, begin sketching an upside down U shape with the dark blue green, which is the second to last green in the second row. I'm going to center it over the gap we left in the trees in the background. And then you are going to duplicate that layer to make it a little bit darker. And you'll also see me cleaning up the shape a bit with the eraser brush. Once it's duplicated, merge those layers down. And once those layers are merged down, you're going to lightly blend out the color to kind of puff out the edges, allowing for a little bit of the transparency to show through from the background. You're going to lightly blend out this whole shape, and I will meet you next for the next step. After you're happy with your blending in a new layer, you're going to begin lightly sketching in the shape of a heart with the same shade of green on the top of the arbor, and then you're going to puff out the edges with the blending brush just like you did in the last layer, so that way the arbor textures match. In a new layer with the lightest shade of green, which is the third green in the third row, you're going to begin laying little green dots over the top of the dark green arbor we just created and the heart shape. Next, you're going to turn that lighter layer of brightness and the saturation down just a little bit. And when you're happy with the color, merge that layer down onto the original arbor layer, and then you're going to blend both of those colors out. And you're going to use small circular scrubbing motions, and this will help to create a lot of depth in the foliage of the rose bush. This blending will take a little bit, so definitely don't rush through it. Take as much time as you need. And when you're done, that's actually going to take us into part 4. So if you need to pause the video to catch up, or if you'd like to take a break, definitely feel free to. And I will see you in a minute for part 4. This layer is probably one of the more repetitive layers, so if you definitely are feeling like you need a break, definitely feel free to stop the video or to pause and catch up, but we are going to be moving on to part 4. So in a new layer with the only dark brown color in the palette, with a small brush and high opacity, you're going to create 3 vertical lines on the right hand side next to the arbor, and then connect the tops of each line with a horizontal line, and then repeat the process on the left hand side of the painting and the arbor, only with 4 vertical lines, each being connected by a line running through the top, and that will create our fence. Next, in a new layer with the middle dark blue-green, which is the second from the last green in the second row with the damp brush, begin creating the shapes of the rose bushes in front of the fence. And you'll want to be kind of random about the way you apply the color, so that way it blends out and it's not too smooth. The easiest thing then to do is to create a copy of this bush layer, flip it horizontally and bring it over to the left side, which will leave a slight gap on that left side, so just fill it in with more of that same color. That will save you a lot of handwork. I'm going to make mine slightly darker too by taking the brightness down, and then you're going to merge all of the bush layers down so they're all just on one layer. Then using the blending brush, you're going to lightly blend out the edges of the bushes and the edges of the bottom of the bushes into the grass. And then repeat that step on the bushes on the other side. Next, in a new layer, using the lighter of the dark blue greens, begin placing dots over the top of the bushes just like you did in the arbor layer, and then lightly blend it out with a medium-sized brush and medium opacity. And I decided I want this layer to be a little bit more saturated, so I'm going to turn up the color just a little bit in the brightness and saturation tool. Then you're going to copy and paste this layer on the other side to the left, and using the eyedropper tool to grab the new color of this layer, fill in the missing area and lightly blend it out. That way the bush continues all the way to the edge. Next, in a new layer, we will be creating the roses. With the darkest of the pink reds, you're going to create with a very small brush and high opacity, different little shapes of clusters of dots that will mimic the shape of a rose on the tops of each bush on the right-hand side. And it might take you a couple of tries to get the shape of the roses right. You'll kind of want to vary the sizes and the placements of them. You definitely don't want anything too round. That won't look very natural, so you'll kind of want to mix it up a little bit. Then in a new layer with the middle of the dark pink reds, which is the second from the last red in the fourth row, add a little bit of lighter color to the centers of each rose. You're then going to merge the rose layers down and copy them to the other side, flipping them horizontally, and then you're going to repeat the process to fill in the gap. Next, we will be putting roses on the arbor. Using the same middle shade of pink red that we were just using, start placing roses over the entirety of the arbor and the heart. When you're happy with the amount of new roses that you have, in a new layer using the lightest of the dark pink reds, which is the last red in the fourth row, begin placing color on the centers of each of the new roses. It'll kind of help to vary too. If you don't get them perfectly into the middle, it'll actually help them look a little bit more natural, and it'll kind of help with the idea that the sunset is hitting some of them, so some of the edges might be a little bit lighter in certain places. And then when you're happy with the amount of roses and the color that you've put on them, we'll be moving on to part 5. Beginning part 5. So in a new layer, we're going to start sketching in the shape of the path. We're going to be using the color orange. And so to preface this too, I found putting this layer underneath the arbor and rose bush layers, which will definitely make laying down the pathway easier. That way it can sit right on top of the grass layers and underneath the arbor and rose bush layers. Using the same shade of orange that we used in the sky and a small brush with a medium opacity, begin lightly sketching in the shape of your pathway. Starting smaller from the back and working your way larger in the front, and when you're happy with the shape of the path, lightly begin blending out the edges, adjusting, sharpening, and reblending where needed. And then I'm going to turn the brightness down just a little bit, and in a new layer with the same color and a light hand, we're going to highlight the path we just created. It will definitely help your pathway look a little bit more realistic too if you let the back of it fade away a little bit and make the front of it a little bit brighter. So there's a lighter blue-green shade that I decided to add to the palette here, which is why I wanted to share the palette at the beginning. It wasn't in here until now, but it was in the palette at the very beginning. But if you don't have it, feel free to take the original blue-green color we have to make it a little bit lighter. And then in another new layer over the top of the path layer, begin sketching in some lighter, more detailed grass shapes and then lightly blend out. And this is one of the main reasons why I like to keep everything on different layers, just in case we want to add anything to the painting. So you're going to add a little bit more of that same shade of green we just used, and you're going to create a little bit of depth around the edges of the pond and the edges of all of the grass in the background. Next, in a new layer, using the hard light function and the color black, with very low opacity and a medium-sized brush, you're going to add color to the edges of all four sides of the painting. This will help create a slight vignette effect and create the illusion of an evening setting, and then lightly blend out. So something I wanted to add, I used the damp brush with this to blend with, but I'm finding it to be a lot easier, specifically with the hard light function, to use the soft airbrush. So if I were to go back and redo it, I would probably use the soft airbrush to blend this out rather than the damp brush. Then in another new layer, using the overlay function, you're going to repeat the same process, and with super light opacity, you're going to blend it out. I would switch back over to the damp brush with this one. That was specifically only for hard light. For whatever reason, hard light and the damp brush doesn't work very well, but you are more than welcome to use the soft airbrush for both, but I used the damp brush for this one. Brings us to part 6, which is the very last part, and you've come so far, so if you need to take a break or to stretch your legs, please feel free to, and we'll begin part 6 here in just a moment. So let's begin part 6. And this is where your painting is really going to come to life. So in a new layer, using the overlay function, using the light yellow from the sky color and a very light hand with a medium small brush and medium opacity, you're going to lay a wash of highlight color over top of the whole painting. And then with a medium sized brush, you're going to blend that out. And I tried a couple of different colors, but I found that the yellow really helped to exaggerate some of the highlights much better than even the white did. So I absolutely love the yellow, and I hope you do too. And in your own painting, if you feel like the highlights get too exaggerated, feel free to turn down the brightness or the opacity level, or just to erase or to blend it away. Sometimes I'm a little bit extra, so I like a lot of highlight. Next, with an even smaller brush in a new layer with the overlay function in the color white, you're going to lay down with a very light hand more detail over top of the sky, the bushes, the grass, the pond, and the path. And you're also going to see me adjust the opacity a little bit in the brightness level just to make it look a little bit more natural, and then you're going to lightly blend that out. Next, and you don't have to do this layer if you don't want to, but I decided to make a copy of the yellow highlighted layer that was the one we just worked on, and then turn down the brightness layer level a little bit and the opacity level, and lightly blended it out just to make the highlights stand out even more. Next, in a new layer and using the overlay function and using the color black, you're going to lay down another wash of color over the sides of the painting, and then you're going to lightly blend them out, and then you're going to turn down and adjust the opacity to about 25% to really help deepen and exaggerate the vignette effect. I then decided to create a copy of the arbor base layer, which is the layer only with the foliage, not the roses. I just wanted to make it a little bit darker and to stand out a little bit against the background. And we have reached the end of this tutorial, friend. The last thing we need to do is to sign our painting. I usually like to sign my paintings in the bottom left-hand corner in a similar tone to the colors around it. So I'll be using a shade of green with the light pen. And I also decided that there was a little area of the blending that was driving me a little crazy, and I didn't want to make too many changes to it. So all I did was I created a copy canvas layer, lightly blended out some of the scratchy lines from the actual stamp of the paintbrush, and I lightly added a little bit more roundness to the edge of that bush, and we have ourselves a finished painting. I had so much fun painting this with you, and I hope you had fun too and you learned something new along the way. I have a lot of new videos and new tutorials on their way, and I'm so excited for the future of this channel. Thank you so much for supporting my artwork, and if you like this video and like this kind of content, please like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, happy painting, friend. See you next time.